I don't know if many of you have been watching the news and seeing the stories of the whistleblower from Boeing. It's been something to behold. And so normally, I am not someone who is afraid of flying. But given all of this, on my recent trip to New York, I was pretty afraid. Once I landed in New York, I started to hear folks' phones going off. You know, the sound we're accustomed to for an Amber Alert. I was like, oh my gosh, it must be an Amber Alert. Then I turned on mine and it said an earthquake. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's trying to mess with me today. And a not dissimilar thing happened on my way home, right? I already knew it was happening, but the eclipse, the day I landed, was happening as well. And a rough landing, mind you. What I've seen since this earthquake and eclipse has been a rising talk of apocalyptic thought. Apocalyptic thought being talked about in the news is something that, you know, we're facing, that this earthquake is something we're facing because of sin. Now, natural events shouldn't be blamed on God. I encourage you all to take a look every day at a map of earthquakes on the earth. There are earthquakes every day all over the earth. But folks, there is a rise in sin in our world. And my first statement about Boeing captures that. Corporate greed, profound inequality, and a rise in hatred of the other are becoming pervasive. Now, before going more into that, it's important for us to understand, what does apocalypse actually mean? You see, apocalypse actually just means the revealing of the goal. It actually shouldn't be something we're afraid of. It's the revealing of God's goal in the world. Well, what was Jesus' goal? His goal we see today. There will be one flock with one shepherd whose principles guide us. Micah 6:8 says that God has shown us what is good, what it means to be one who follows Jesus' principles. He says, what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with the Lord your God. Our inability to be humble in this world have led to things like climate change. They've led to poisoned water in countless rivers and more species going extinct than ever before in human history. The holiness of the Good Shepherd, of Jesus, the reason we use that language about Jesus comes from the story of David. Its connection to David is rooted in the reality that he was once a sheep herder, a shepherd. He ultimately guided his people, the people of Israel, to the creation of a strong Israel, of a holy Israel. Yes, he is not without his problems, but he tried. He walked in faith and put his best foot forward as often as he could. You see, Jesus, in our first reading today, is referenced by Peter as the stone who was rejected by you. And you that he was addressing was the religious elite, the powerful of the world. Our powerful people in our world today reject these principles we're talking about. And you see, I don't say this as a condemnation of people who struggle with accepting the science of climate change, because the average person who struggles with that is actually a product of a very deliberate campaign by those who are powerful, denying such science. I blame those with corporate power and greed who've shared this narrative to bolster their profits. The quote by Peter from Psalms sums up so much of what our struggle is today. So many have chosen the greed I've talked about as their guiding principle. They reject the cornerstone of a new world devoid of hate, a new world where those on the margins are propped up, a new world where humans take ownership of our charge in Genesis to be stewards of the earth. We are called to be shepherds of life itself on earth, and we are given this power. Many of us might be asking, well, what is it that I can do? Well, I'd like to share with you a fact that I recently learned about why last year was so hot. So many of us noticed last year as being extremely hot. And yes, climate change was the reason, the biggest piece of that pie, but there was another piece too. Actually, in our efforts to decrease pollution in the world, we have done that, right? We've reduced the amount of harmful chemicals in the atmosphere, but some of those chemicals actually reduce temperature. And so as we've reduced those, we've unveiled a lot of the actual effects of climate change. What does that mean? Well, if humanity has the power to reduce pollution to the point that we actually have meaningful change, that means that each one of us can take ownership and do our part in reducing the harmful effects that humanity can have on the environment. We are following in David's footsteps, building God's kingdom on earth. To love God is to be shepherded by the shepherd, but it's also to be shepherds to the world. We at Holy Family and so many sister inclusive communities accept this call. I see it every day in each and every one of you. My charge to you is also to acknowledge your stewardship in a way that keeps the faith that you and each and every one of you has the power to make a difference. Allow this fire to burn and you'll see the results. We saw it last year. We must tend this fire because it's our calling. We are called to be a great light to all of the world. Even in the midst of such a grand duty, it's important for you to know, again, that you are being shepherded. God is the great shepherd. God will never leave your side. Christ never allows us to be alone. Knowing this, how can we fear anything? Our goal is peace and love on the earth. Our apocalyptic revelation is that peace and love, no tear being shed, are all possibilities, and that we have a duty to manifest that in the world. Amen?
Amen.